All right. Picking up where we left off, this is the Lucifer Principle, lesson number 7, if I'm not mistaken. We're currently doing the section about the superorganism. And this particular section is even heroes are insecure. Funny, Issa Rae named her series Insecure. From none but self expect applause. He noblest lives and noblest dies, who makes and keeps himself made laws. Sir Richard Burton. The man mindful of his reputation does not reveal his sadness. Anonymous early Anglo-Saxon author. If we are so desperately dependent on our connection to other human beings, why are we plagued with the particular notion that we should be detached, aloof, dignified, and independent? Why does the modern ideal of self-sufficiency appeal to us so strongly? The theme of self-sufficiency crops up in pop psychology with nagging consistency. Marilyn Malkowitz, author of a 1985 book called The Whiz Kids, for example, profiled entrepreneurs who became successful before the age of 40. Then criticized them for being insecure. Often Malkowitz said these young businessmen and women don't feel worthy of their success. Implicit in her complaint was the notion that healthy human beings would never be plagued by such doubts. But do the supremely confident and self-contained individuals you and I are constantly compared to exist? Apparently not. Ernle Branford, the military historian, portrays both the legendary Carthaginian general Hannibal and the Roman who defeated him, Scipio Africanus, as men who were easily able to exist without emotional dependence on others. But in reality, these men were anything but self-contained. Their fortunes from one day to the next relied on the loyalty of tens of thousands of troops, and it hung on their ability to maintain the confidence of figures even further removed from them in the gram web of the superorganism. The powers of the state back home. Without the financial backing of the Roman Senate and the Council of Carthage, both men's efforts would have been doomed. When Rome's Senate accused Scipio of pilfering money from the public treasuries, the general was far from indifferent to the charge. He burst into the senatorial hall with his account books, tore them up in front of the lawmakers, and stormed out of Rome, never to return. Not exactly the gesture of a man untouched by the opinions of others. Historian Branford, convinced that Scipio was indeed a master of self-reliance, had probably been deceived by a trick of aristocracy, a theatrical charade used by those who wish to exert power over others. It's a device even ambitious chimpanzees employ to maintain authority. The ruse goes something like this. The dominant male sits in the center of a noisy multitude, looking utterly indifferent to what goes on around him. This is what pickup artists actually use to become alpha male of the group. And it does work. Lower-ranking monkeys nervously glance left, right, and behind them for clues as to what they should do next. They cast frequent and furtive glances at the master chimp to see if it's time for them to honor him with a deferentially downcast gaze or to discover if he has turned aside. For when his back is toward them, the underlings can get away with some forbidden gesture. But the lofty head of the chimpanzee clan seems to look at no other. He gives the impression that he need take his cues from no mere earthly beast. Even the hierarchy-topping monkey, who looks so impressively aloof, however, is boiling with social emotions he doesn't dare show. Ethologist Frans de Waal made a 6-year study of chimps in Belgium's Arnhem Zoo and published the results in a brilliantly illuminating volume called Chimpanzee Politics. In it, de Waal describes two males competing for the top position in the group. The combatants confront each other with all the dignity of chivalric knights. Each stands erect, his hair raised in a magnificent mantle about him, looking massive and heroic. The pair stare into each other's eyes without flinching. Any male knows this as bravado. This is the stare down. In fact, you can see this before any boxing match, where the two guys come to the ring and actually prance back and forth, and then they walk up to the referee and they stare each other in the eyes. And that's the stare down, to say that I'm not afraid. But the manly stoicism with which the duo square off is a pose maintained only with an extreme exertion of self-control. After the confrontation is over, both chimps march away. When one is certain he is out of sight of gawkers, all the emotions he's been holding back suddenly rampage across his face. His upper lip flies up, leaving his teeth bare, the ultimate chimpanzee of nervousness. Realizing that another member of the tribe might spot him and note his delayed terror, the recent combatant tries over and over again to pull the rebellious lip down over his teeth and regain his dignified appearance. But the stress-filled grimace simply will not leave his face. Under the dignity and confidence of a few moments before a seething cauldron of insecurity. Yeah, black men know this well. It's called false bravado. In fact, white guys do it. Hitler used to go through something similar at the height of his power. He would bully an imposing head of state, shouting, fuming, seemingly invulnerable to the inhibitions that weaken other men. Then, when he was alone in his room, the indomitable leader would collapse into a screaming, nervous wreck. To make sure no one he wanted to intimidate ever saw that side of his personality, the glorious leader would carefully rehearse for major meetings in front of a mirror. T.E. Lawrence even saw the roots of imperturbability at work amongst the desert aristocrats of Arabia. Lawrence described a group of Arab chiefs summoned to the tent of their leader, who had just discovered that he and his vassals were about to be given 2,000 camels, a veritable fortune in livestock, by the British. The chieftains scrambled excitedly toward the dwelling where their meeting was about to take place, then quickly stopped themselves outside the tent flap to compose their faces, their postures, and their hauteur, so that they would not march in with the silly looks of glee that the news of the unexpected fortune had stamped all over them. Black women do this too. Black women put on a brave face for everything. They do exactly the same. Even my daughter, when she was small, when I come over, she'd be happy to see me. And then she would turn her back and go toward her mother and start smiling and pretend like it didn't bother her one way or the other whether I was there. The lofty independence projected by Scipio, Hannibal, Hitler, and the Arab chiefs was nothing but an old reflex left over from pre-human times, a masquerade designed to further the impression of stature, magnificence, and strength. But under the mask of independence, even the most fearsome leaders are vulnerable to the views of others. Sounds like the gender war, does it not? Men of power pull off their disguise of aloofness well enough to fool even the psychological experts. But the success of their sham is our undoing, saddling us with a mistaken vision of self-sufficiency, imbuing us with the guilt for our dependence on the superorganism. Loving the child within is not enough. Current psychology is often blind to the existence of the larger being of which we are a part. Because of that blindness, many highly regarded therapeutic experts have a habit of dictating impossible cures. A group of prestigious doctors, for example, appeared on TV's Phil Donahue show, determined to show how you can confront stress as one human being in isolation. If you're a housewife and society seems convinced that your daily chores are on par with garbage collection, the specialist gave the impression that all you have to do is sit at the kitchen table and talk to yourself into self-respect. One homemaker stood up in the audience and put the prevailing notion in 2 short sentences. It all depends on the image you project, she said. If you think well of yourself, other people will think well of you. Thinking well of yourself was not enough to save Scipio Africanus from the contempt of the Roman Senate, nor will it be enough to magically alter the degree of respect the Western world accords to those who clean house, cook, and raise children. I would also say that for black people. It takes more. It takes ourselves together and raising our children to respect themselves and look better of themselves in spite of the Western world is really, really difficult. One of Donahue's guest authorities declared in no uncertain terms that you don't have to be a victim of what society or what anyone else thinks of you. But according to psychologist Saul Godin, author of the Institute for Family Research and Education, projecting a positive attitude works not because of the changes it makes on the individual psyche, but because of the improvements it generates in relationships with others. In other words, that mask that you put on. Even a lot of times, women do this all the time. A lot of times women will put on something nice or something really pretty and go out so that they can get compliments and feel better about themselves, because if people think that they're more successful and think they're prettier and they give them compliments, then the outside will change the inside. The best way to turn the self-destruct mechanism off is not to weep over childhood traumas until we can finally love the child within. It is to realize that the self-destruct devices are turned on and off by current social forces. Our sense of how we measure up to the standards of those we respect in our relationships with friends, husbands, wives, and even dogs and cats. The idea that relationships with animals can protect our physical and emotional health is no whimsy. Studies of heart attack victims have shown that owning a dog or cat diminishes the odds of a second attack. Science will be well served to retain individual and kin selection's insights, admit our limitations, and move on. In fact, the fact is, if individual selection survival instinct is our ruling force, then self-destruct mechanisms should not exist. Or at best, their actions should be limited to aiding those who carry genes nearly identical to our own. But animals of all kinds are born with a virtual arsenal of self-built-in poisons pills, and a range of evidence even wider that which I've had the space to present here indicates that these biological circuits are linked to the interest of a coagulation of fellow creatures who are not necessarily kin. The concept of the social organism is more than just a literary metaphor. It is closer to the comparison between a wave of water and a ray of light, two radically different phenomena subject to many of the same natural laws. For example, cyclic AMP, which acts as an intracellular messenger nearly everywhere in your body. It is an alarm substance slime mold amoebas sensing starvation sent to rally their solitary fellows into consolidated slug-like beast. The gene NM23, which controls the clustering or dispersion of cancer cells in humans, also handles the congregation and dispersion among the cells of slime mold. Contrary to the contemporary theory, evolution is not built solely on competition between self-interested loners. It also relies heavily on contests between teams of individuals striving for a group survival. As a result, psychological feedback loops often call upon the individual to sacrifice his health or even his life for the sake of a larger whole. We have inherited much of our biology, including that involved in behavior, from the cellular ancestors who first learned to form communities. As a consequence, innumerable organismistic mechanisms operate within assemblies of human beings. In coming chapters, we'll encounter quite a few of them. And that is the end of chapter 3, if I'm not mistaken. You can see all the notes and all the footnotes that he has. He's not just pulling stuff out of his behind. You know, his footnotes are almost as long as the chapters. He is a well-read, well-researched person. So we're just looking at, these are just all the footnotes. That's the end of part 3. We're going to get into part 4 another time. But the biggest myth that people keep telling, and the biggest pressure that they keep putting on folks, and Carol Quigley said the same thing, that people have power in groups, in tribes, in societies. And the larger, more focused the group is, the better it performs. That's how come China's kicking our ass right now. Because we're more individualistic than China is. So China can basically turn at the drop of a dime. I remember watching Star Trek, and they talked about the Borg ship. The difference between a Borg ship and a Starfleet ship is that the Starfleet ship acts as groups of individuals. And the Borg ship, even though it's immense size, it actually thinks as one mind. The United States, as successful as it is and has been, and as powerful as it has been, it doesn't think of itself as one mind like China does. China seemingly have very stoic and sometimes bad-tempered individuals, but to China, the individual doesn't matter as much as the group. And the United States mistakenly thinks that the individual is more important than the group, and it's not. That's like when we send 200,000-300,000 people to war to act on our behalf. Societies are formed around a group think or group organism. The United States spends a whole lot of money to send you to school so that you would conform to the group think in the United States, and it is 90% effective. Very few people escape or even want to escape that kind of group think. We like the same cars, we like the same clothes, we like the same homes, we pretty much like the same food within a range. Everybody has a smartphone. Everybody who doesn't have a smartphone wants a smartphone. So that is the group think that we have. If you think, going back to the example of the termites or the ants, how even though we can examine the group of ants working together, but if you look at it, their whole society functions like one organism. Defending yourself, feeding yourself, taking out the waste, repairing yourself. Your cells do that on a daily basis. You are an organism. You are a society within a society. Within your body, you got trillions of individuals. So that rugged individualism that we like to think that we have, or that the United States teaches us, does not exist. Even Ayn Rand, who actually wrote Atlas Shrugged, even those individualistic type people actually tried to form their own group on an island. But anyway, this is a short piece, short lesson. It just kind of brought home what we were thinking about the group, and especially leaders who we think are individuals or great individuals are just part of the group, just like we are. They're just better at hiding it. And you see a lot of the individual things that we do to hide it or to pretend like it's not there, or the same thing that chimps and apes and all the other kind of animals do to not show emotions or to protect themselves. But anyway, that's all I got for this one. I think the next one will be better because it's going to talk about memes and how ideas propagate and how ideas are powerful, especially in this day and age. With that, I'm going to cut out of here, ladies. This is continuing the Lucifer Principle, lesson 7. I'll draw with it from what you will, and I'll see you on the next one.